Shalom, holy brothers and sisters. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Toldot. This week's Bible portion is called Toldot, and it means generations. So it's referring to the generations of our patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And this week's portion mostly deals with the life of Yitzchak. If you take apart the name Yitzchak, the Yud, which is a 10 in Gematria, symbolizes the 10 tests or trials that God put him through. The tzaddik is corresponding to his mother's age when she conceived him, which was 90 years old, which is why his name is Yitzchak, which means laughter, because Abraham and Sarah were barren for so many years that when an angel told Abraham that he would have a child, and Abraham told his wife, Sarah laughed in a mocking way because she didn't think it was possible. She thought she was too old to have a child. The chet in Yitzchak corresponds with the number 8, and it corresponds to how old he was when he was circumcised. He was 8 days old, unlike his father, who I think was 90. And then the kuf, which is 100 in Gematria, represents his father's age when he was conceived. So when it starts off the Parsha and it talks about the generations of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, it says twice that Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was the son of Abraham. So this seems somewhat redundant. If one of them is the father, then of course the other one is the son. Why does the Torah have to repeat it twice? We know that nothing is superfluous in the Torah, and the reason why it's repeated twice is because there was a time when Sarah was abducted by Avimelech. And so some of the skeptics thought that it could have been Avimelech's child and not Abraham's child. But the proof, they didn't have DNA tests back then, the proof that it was in fact Abraham's child and not Avimelech's son was that Isaac looked like a spitting image of his father. So there was no question as to who was the father. And it's interesting because it says that this was a miracle. Now, a lot of times children look like their parents. I mean, we've seen it all the time. So why is that considered such a miracle? And the reason is because usually a person's character traits are seen by their features of their face. Like they say, the eyes are the seat of the soul. Different shapes and types of eyebrows mean different things. I mean, there's a whole study on features of the face, the jaw structure, and all the different facial features, the cheekbones and everything. It has different meanings, and you can tell a lot about a person by their face. So the reason why it's so kind of unique and miraculous, if you will, that Isaac looked like Abraham is because their personalities and their character traits were complete polar opposites. Abraham was the epitome of chesed, loving kindness. He was very outgoing, and he was known for welcoming guests, and he was very social. Whereas Yitzchak was known for the Kabbalistic sphera or attribute of severity. So it's exactly the opposite, chesed and gevura. Isaac was more inward. He was quiet, he was peaceful, he kept to himself. He was not the social butterfly that his father was. So although they were two polar opposites personality-wise, the fact that they looked exactly alike is considered somewhat, strange or rare. So Isaac and Rebekah were barren, just like Isaac's father, Abraham and Sarah, were barren for many, many years. Isaac and Rebekah were barren for 20 years, although the first 10 years she was too young to conceive, so it was really 10 years that they tried to conceive and they could not. So they prayed to God, and God answered their prayers, and Rebekah became pregnant with twins. The twins were Yaakov and Esav. And Yaakov represented the spiritual forces, and Esav represented the material forces. And since pregnancy, when they were in utero, they were already battling inside her. And the Midrash says, the commentaries tell us that whenever Rebekah would walk past a house of prayer, that Yaakov was kind of like struggling to come out. He was attracted to the prayer, the spirituality, the holiness. Whereas whenever she walked by a house of idol worship, Esav, the evil brother, the one that was a murderer and a hunter, whereas Yaakov was quiet and he was peaceful and to himself and kept in the tent and studied. So Esav was attracted to the houses of idol worship, and he would be the one trying to come out whenever she passed by there, and it really tortured her throughout her pregnancy. It mentions in the Parsha that she said, like, why did I get pregnant to suffer? And I think it symbolizes really the internal battle that we all have between the spiritual and the physical. We want something spiritual, but our physical body craves something else. So we all have that inner struggle inside. Something that I enjoyed reading about in this week's Torah portion, which I could apply to what's going on in the world today, is that from the verse that says, the voice was the voice of Jacob, but the hands were the hands of Esav. So we're talking about now, because Esav was the firstborn, he had the birthright. Now the birthright is just a spiritual blessing. It does not mean that he got an inheritance, property, land, money, nothing. It's just a spiritual blessing. But since Esav was a materialistic person, it didn't really interest him, so he actually sold his birthright to his brother Yaakov for a bowl of lentil soup. So Yitzchak wanted to give the birthright to Esav because although Esav was a wicked son, he saw the potential in him because he had the raw potential and the power to transform his evil into good. And if he would have done that, if he would have realized his potential, he could have been extremely powerful and great in a positive sense. So he wanted to give Esav the birthright. But Rebecca, she knew that Esav was not going to transform himself. He was not going to change and become the potential that his father saw in him. And so she encouraged Jacob to trick their father into giving Jacob the birthright, the blessing. But because, of course, we're not allowed to lie, what they did was they had Esav sell the birthright to Jacob, so it was officially his. Esav officially gave it up, but they did not tell Yitzchak. In fact, they deceived him. They put, I think it was the wool of a lamb on Jacob's arms so that he would feel hairy, just like his brother was very hairy. And so when Isaac, who was blind, came to give the birthright, the blessing to his son, who he thought was Esav, he says, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esav. So what it represents is Jacob represents the house of study, the yeshiva boys, if you will, the ones that study Torah. And Esav represents war, battle, struggle, etc. So there was an interesting commentary on Chabad.org that from here we can see that the study of Torah is paramount for the moral defense and also for the spiritual security of the nation, because Jacob represents Israel. And Israel is the only country in the world which exempts mandatory military service to people who go to study Torah. So from here we can see the importance of studying Torah. And also another thing that I wanted to mention about Isaac realizing the potential in Esav, even though Esav was the more difficult child, is that we should learn from here that as parents we need to accept, respect, and be proud of the individual nature of our child. Our child is not going to necessarily be exactly like us in their character and their desires and their needs and their wants. And we need to respect that and love them the way that they are without trying to change them into a copy of ourselves. So that's what I wanted to share with you regarding this week's Parsha. I hope that you enjoyed it and have a restful Shabbat. Please subscribe and share. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Bye-bye.